Dude, it's munchies. I hear ya. I freaking gained weight. I'm starting to. I feel myself going down a little bit. What?
What else? They said they saw Claire. Claire gained a bunch of weight. They said, just sad. Yeah, she was kind of just. She was always a little bit bigger than Trin. I could see it. Her mom is big. Oh,
I brought a bit of a lemon for you if you want to try it.
Hey, Mary.
Good morning.
Bright and early.
That's right.
Whoa, knock it off.
There's a fearless leader.
I don't know about fearless. I'm
Oh,
here.
You're fearless.
I showed up. Just finished packing camp lunches.
Yeehaw, off to camp they go.
Yeah.
Push
I want to
'em
see
out the
Jen's
door.
view. That's the one I'm interested in right now.
I know. I think
My
she's
spice
being
rack.
polite by not showing her,
Trying not to make us feel bad.
Yeah, sitting on the beach,
Mm-hmm.
We could all put that fake background in ours.
I know, right? I texted with her last night and I'm like, Mary and I were talking about how your Wi-Fi is probably going to be about as stable as the one at your house.
Yeah. There's something wrong with that picture, isn't there?
It's true. Yeah. Hi, Paul. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you today?
Good. How are you?
Great,
I
thank
am
you.
going to come get that tarragon, I swear.
Whenever. I might cut bunches for you, but I thought about doing that and then I thought no, because I'll give it to her when she's not ready.
Yeah.
So
So it involved me cooking, which I haven't done in several weeks.
oh, like domestic things that take time to do, but you have no time because you're never at home just with time. That one?
It's true. Yeah, that's the one.
All the fun things like putting stuff up. Oh, I don't know, cleaning.
Cleaning is the worst.
I have no idea what you mean.
I
can't imagine what you're going through. I mean, yeah, it's hard enough what we're dealing with, and I can't imagine what you're going through. I'm sorry.
We're very lucky. It's a good problem to have, but we are exhausted.
Right. Yeah. Well, you tell yourself that till February, and then we'll watch.
Exactly. No, because winter will be here before we know it.
Yeah, but still, I have a feeling you'll be busy all the time.
That's okay. If we can just get like one person would be huge, like 3 people, we would be like fine.
Oh my God. So, I've got a person with like some personal things, and then I have someone else who had a pre-planned thing that she's doing. And then I lose like my summer guy in a week.
We're all
like,
hurting.
It's the whole
it's everything though.
Yeah.
It's like the bank. And I mean, there's not an industry that isn't suffering from this. Every single industry. I read an article this morning about like workers in city capacities, like municipal workers, like it's everything. So
yeah, and I don't know. Maybe everybody. I don't know. It's a big complex thing. So yeah, you're right. Well, everybody's stuck. So we have to reevaluate and figure out how we're doing it.
I'm going to come.
There is that Japanese system.
Go to work.
You can do that Japanese system. Where everybody pays in advance.
Show us a profile. Is that a new cut or do you have a tail in the back? Oh, okay. Ooh, you did trim it a bit.
Do it like this.
Yeah, I took the mask off and got rid of the beard and trimmed the hair.
Wow. Spiffy.
All right, it is 8:00. Do we have a quorum? I see. Sorry, I'm using my phone for the meeting portion so I could type notes. Hi, Jen. You're muted.
Could you pull the curtains in the back, please, so we don't see the
Yeah.
view?
Whatever.
But that's
Isla Mujeres.
Rat.
I selected this location intentionally.
Thanks, rub it
Can you
in.
guys-
Looks like a real dump.
Is that Georgetown Lake?
Yes.
It is. It's Georgetown
No.
Lake right here.
I think that's Granby. I don't think that doesn't look like our lake.
A little bigger, I guess. Oh, fine. I'm in
It's like
Granby.
Lake Dillon.
Oh, look, there's a whale in the background.
Hey, your view's not bad, Mary.
Do we
Hey,
have an
Mary.
actual, I
Mary,
guess, do we need a quorum for a work session or no?
We have a
'Cause we're
quorum
not
anyway.
voting.
We have 4.
We do. Oh, I
Yeah.
I'm scrolling. Oh, there we go. Yes. Okay. Cause Steve's here. All right, cool.
You have to count yourself too.
Oh yeah, I do. Do I count?
I do.
All right, then I will go ahead and, oh, I see Kevin just joined too. All right. I will go ahead and call our work session to order. It is 8:01 a.m. on July 22nd, 2021. And I called this work session for the Georgetown Business Promotions Commission to order. Can we get a roll call, please?
Yeah, and I think actually it's a special meeting, right, Amanda?
Oh, is it sorry, I
Because
apologize.
you guys want to
It's
make a recommendation? Yeah, no problem.
Correct. I called this special meeting of the Georgetown Business Promotions Commission to order.
Okay, Mary Smith,
Here.
Paul Boat,
Here.
Steve Skalski,
here.
Kevin Kuharik,
Here.
Chairman Cooper.
Here.
Okay, and that's all we got today.
Awesome. Do we have any public comments or attendees that I can't see?
No, we do not.
Awesome. All right. Well, then we're just going to jump right in. Okay. Well, thank you guys all for being here today. The goal of this is to get our recommendation together this morning for the Board of Selectmen. So for their considerations for mobile food vendors. Jen, thank you for joining us from Mexico. That was very nice and very unnecessary, but we are really glad you're on with us this morning. Just to kind of keep things flowing, what I thought would be the best way to kind of approach this would be to go through the list that was sent out on the previous work session and just narrow it so that we can get to the fine tune things. If anyone has any opening comments, share them now before we jump into the list that was sent out, and it was included in the attachments for this meeting as well as the previous work session with the Board of Selectmen. Does anyone have any comments before we jump in? Okay. You guys are on my phone, so I can use my computer to type and not have to toggle back and forth. So I might end up killing my video in a few minutes, but we'll just get started. All right, so first things first, what are acceptable types of mobile food vendors? Food truck only, carts, or stands? On the Board of Selectmen work session, which I think all of us were in attendance of, it seemed that there was a little bit of a discrepancy between carts versus food trucks versus stands. Let's go ahead and tackle this one first. What are thoughts from the commission?
I'll start. I'm in favor of all three of them. I think that there were some valid points from some of the other people participating in the meeting when they were talking about the carts or stands in the downtown business and being a little bit more specific to the historic aspects of the 6th Street. But that doesn't, exclude food trucks or trailers throughout and in other areas too.
I agree. I'll have to carry licensing to operate. I'll have to have food service licenses. And there is certain validity to each operation. And I don't think that we should narrow anybody. So I'm with you, Mary. Do any other commissioners have any thoughts on this before we move on to the next? All right.
I do. Nope. It's Kevin.
Hi, sorry.
I think we need to be broader in our description of what a food vendor might look like. I think, food trucks and carts and things should be examples of, but I can think of at least two other models. One would be Hawkers. I don't know if you're familiar with Hawker bags, but it's a shoulder strap cooler where people can freely stroll up and down sidewalks or through parks or wherever. And so that's a model that we're not talking about that would fit Georgetown. And then the bicycle vendors, where they have like a cooler on the front of the bicycle, and they push sodas or ice cream through the streets. And so I think if we just say food truck, we're limiting ourselves to a model that has mechanical issues getting to the mountains, whereas a Hawker bag, you throw it in the back of your Mini Cooper and you zip up here and you're in business. And so I think we need to broaden and be more general, and maybe just list, food truck, blah, 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 as examples.
Okay. No, that's a very valid point.
And that's somewhat, I wrote that list, and that's somewhat why I reworded everything to just say mobile food vendor as opposed to food truck, just to encompass all of those possibilities. In the research that I'm doing and finding, who might be willing to come, I think mobile food vendor covers pretty much anything we would get.
No, I think that leaving the language of it broad is probably the most effective way to get this to the Board of Selectmen, unless our Board of Selectmen rep doesn't feel the same way.
No, I like that.
Okay, perfect. So we can add in the language of basically a licensed food vendor if that's
Licensed mobile food vendor.
Yeah.
okay.
Totally.
The licensed is important. That's because that means it's just not some rando that like threw some stuff together in their kitchen that's not sanitary. If you're a licensed food vendor, that means that you are recognized by the health department to serve food to the public. And that, I think that's an important distinction that does need to be included in the language, because it means that you have access to a commissary at the very least, or you are in an agreement with a restaurant. Like any restaurant can let somebody come in and do and prep and things like that. But it means that like you have the refrigeration, the storage, and the sanitation practices that are important, because we don't want someone to come and give all of the tourists salmonella. That would be a bad look. All right. So is
Kevin's
everybody good with? Oh, I'm sorry, Kevin. You guys, I only can see 4 of you, so just yell if I don't acknowledge you. I'm not trying to look over people, but because I'm using my computer, I only have my little cell phone view. Kevin, Go ahead again. I'm so sorry.
And back to the Hawker bags. I think we need some commitment and backup from the town of Georgetown and law enforcement in case, mobile food vendors sort of take off for Georgetown and people see a potential quick buck, and they go to Family Dollar and buy a couple dozen Otter Pops and throw them in a cooler and start walking around downtown and selling them for $1 a piece. And so I'd kind of like to know from Kent how the licensing is going to be enforced if somebody doesn't pre-register with the town and just shows up and starts selling bottles of water at the intersection of Rose and 6th and Otter Pops in Strauss Park.
I don't know the answer to that just yet. I think we have to go through quite a few more questions here, but I could see where, just like other things, you ask them whether they have licensing, and if they fail to show it, then then additional actions occur. So
I see that Randy unmuted.
Yeah, good. I just wanted some sort of awareness and some sort of direction. So thank you. That seems good.
I would respond to that if you guys like. Mostly I was just going to sit here and eavesdrop and make notes for when it does go to the board on some different opinions. And we already enforce that. We have people try that already, especially down at the lake. And we address it immediately. Business license. As far as food licensing go, we don't involve ourselves too much. We don't have what you see downtown which I miss because I used to work and live downtown, and you have people with the cooler and you can stop at 5 o'clock in the morning and buy some really good but strange breakfast burritos. Beyond that, we already enforce that. So we just, as long as we don't put language in there that's going to make it ambiguous.
And that's where the licensing for the vendor, it would be applicable. I mean, in order to have if you're a food truck, you still have to have a food service license. If you're anything that you're preparing and selling to the public, even, I mean, if it's your cupcakes, you're supposed to have a food service license. So that's, I mean, there's certain things that I think people, and I don't want to say can get away with, but I don't think that they would, if they were standing on the street, then I think we would have an obligation to make sure that they're an actual food service license. I mean, and it's not, and that wouldn't be hard for town of Georgetown to figure out because they already would have been permissed and they already would have pulled a sales tax license. That's the other piece of this that we'll come to down a little bit, but making sure that we're getting sales tax from these people would imply that they already possess a resale license in Colorado. They're already on the above board, basically. But that would be another way for us to kind of make sure that whoever we're dealing with, we're collecting sales tax from.
Well, basically, it just sounds like when a food vendor applies for a license to operate in Georgetown, it's all the administration is handled prior
Correct.
to the vendor getting on the street, and then Randy and his team would simply look for the Georgetown business, the license Georgetown issued, right?
Well, I mean, we would, and maybe we haven't gotten to that point yet, but I will add that into my notes here, that we issue a specific license. And then if that license exists, then we know these people are above board. What we aren't going to do is have a bunch of people just show up, like to Kevin's point, and go buy Otter Pops at the Family Dollar. That is not going to be a part of this goal. Go ahead, Paul.
This might be simplistic and off topic a little bit, but which everybody loves to hear. But this is a situation that does occur during Christmas market and things like that every now and then. And I'm wondering if we can't, with our licensing, and I know that we're doing this about the language, but some kind of visible license sales tax requirement. So beyond just the little paper, maybe a lanyard for street hawkers and stuff like that, that has a color that's easily visible from a distance, that would let us know that A, they have the licensing, and B, they have the tax. Because every year with Christmas market, there's an issue with coming back and people saying they don't have the tax, they don't have the this and the that. And it's because we tell them to go to the state, we give them a packet and it's on them from there. I think it would be better if we had some sort of visible system that we required and perhaps issued by the town. And it's a little extra work, but I think it would be worth it for us.
Okay. I'm going to put that into the notes, but we'll definitely, because at the end of the day, honestly, the person that's going to manage these is Jen Jordan. And she's going to be the one that's going to be ultimately responsible for making sure that these people are doing what they're supposed to do legally. And then getting that information back to Mary as far as sales tax and things like that would fall on Jen. All right. So I think we've exhausted the acceptable types of mobile food vendors. We're all in agreement. It's broad, just as long as they're licensed. On what types of property will we allow mobile food vendors? Public property and private property with permission from the property owner. This is obviously fairly, I mean, public property, do we need to, and this is maybe a question for Kent, do we need to explicitly say like parks, town of Georgetown property? Like how deep into this do we need to get for the Board of Selectmen?
I think if you just have a general consensus, I think there may be specific issues regarding certain parts of public property. I mean, like Christmas market, the roads are blocked off. You know, if you just say parks, then all of a sudden, well, you're on the street, you know, but that's not allowed. And if you get too specific, you get a problem. I think that just the two categories, public property or private property with permission of the property owner, what I could see, you know, like, and I'll, you know, just use it regarding Paul's place at the visitor center. You know, that's not public property. It sort of is, but it sort of isn't. More private property would be up the street from him at the Crazy Horse. You know, would a mobile food vendor be allowed at the Crazy Horse property? Be better use of that property than what it is now. But, you know, and I just use that as an example. I have no.
I know.
I just need to clear that the visitor center is private property.
Right, Paul. Sometimes it's viewed, people can view it otherwise, but yes, you're right, Paul.
They can view it if they like, but it is privately owned.
Correct, sir.
Thank you.
I'm not trying to offend you, Paul, so.
I'm not offended. Just to be clear.
Just to further dig into the public property, we're also then talking streets. And I think that we're going to, again, get into the weeds a little bit here as to where a vendor might be parked on the street, aside from a special event, aside from Christmas market, because remember, we're kind of discussing this in terms of a long-term summer season. We've discussed a little bit, and I know this jumps into the next category about location, but does someone want a food truck parked outside of their house on the public right-of-way for weeks and weeks and weeks? And so I think when we're talking public property versus private property, we need to be clear about the street use or the street parking also.
Well, and I view it as a better distinction between commercially zoned property and residential zone property. That there should be a distinction with that. So
I would also challenge, though, that if you look at like the Heritage Center, that's residential, but
True.
You would have, I could have a food truck down at my house. Randy, go ahead.
I think obviously the private property with permission of the owner, but as far as public property goes, there should be a significant prohibition unless it's with specific permission of the town. So the area is vetted, so we don't have somebody pulling up into that parking area just south of the visitor center and deciding to make a line of food trucks there. Areas like that, or just pull up down to the lake and decide to do it. If it's vetted and allowed by the town, that would make it much easier. But if it looks like to other vendors, especially less compliant vendors, that they can just drive their truck in and make their sales, that would be where's the problem. Traditionally, except in public areas with organized through the municipalities, they're not allowed on public right of way or public properties.
And just to add to what Randy said, on the private property side, I think consideration should be given to go beyond just the permission of the property owner. I mean, I don't know what properties are we talking about? Who wants a food truck right next door to them for weeks and weeks at a time operating? So I think simplistically, we look at private property as maybe being a parking lot that the town doesn't own, that the property owner is willing to give. But are there other use cases we have to be conscious of, that may cause other businesses an issue?
I think Amanda's putting a food truck in her yard is not a good idea.
Well, that's too bad, because it's going to be a really great food truck and you're all going to love it. No,
I didn't say I wouldn't participate in it.
I was just gonna
Sorry,
say
go ahead.
that, I mean, the way we word it is obviously super important, but feel like we're not just gonna get random food trucks just driving into town and parking wherever they want to, that the food trucks that we allow, and I don't know how we word this or how we do this specifically, but that need to be vetted and told where they're going to be, not just sort of like a free-for-all of food trucks driving around Georgetown, parking wherever they want. It will specifically be invited by me, and however we decide to do that, but invited and told, we would like you to come for this, and this is where you will be. And so
Mhm.
I don't know how we word that to make it the most acceptable to the selectmen, but that's how I envision this process to go, as in it's very controlled. And we right now, we don't have random food trucks just pulling into Georgetown Park or wherever they want. I don't think changing the ordinance is going to invite that. Does that make sense?
No, I agree. And I think that, I mean, so the most important kind of like kickoff language is that the food truck has to be vetted and permissed, so that nixes any, rando person going to the Family Dollar, as we've discussed off the top. But the types of property that we allow the mobile food vendor, I mean, Mary, to make this simple for you guys, is it better for us to say where we don't want them, or do we need to be, and Ken, obviously, Randy, everyone weigh in on this language so we make this straightforward for the people who have to actually enforce this? Or do we say, public property with permission from town of Georgetown, private property with written permission from the property owner,
Or
with the
as
exception of
designated? Like if we word
Sorry.
it as designated by the town? Not,
designated.
you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a better way to
as
say it.
designated by the town, as designated by private property owner with permission, something like that.
And
We
that
need to
would give
keep-
the town to the control to say, no, you can't put a food truck in front of Guanella Pass Brewing. That's not allowed, because that is technically town property. Even though, or you can't put a food truck in front of Nigel and Anderson. And the town would then have the ability to control that, unless there was an event that we would want to have that, which only time I can think that we would ever want a food truck on 6th Street, personally, in my opinion, would be if the street was closed. On a normal random day, if that street's open, I don't personally feel like we would want to see a food truck on that street.
Well, again,
That's just my opinion.
I also think you need to apply some rules to private property use as well. So there could be a business that has private property right across the street from it. And if all the town does is get permission from the property owner to have a food truck there, then Guanella Pass or other businesses could find a food truck right across the street from their property for a long period of time, even though they're not on the public right of way.
That's absolutely true, because that would be the situation with the parking lot next to Hotel de Paris in relationship to Happy Cooker.
But I mean, I guess if I was getting like married at the Hotel de Paris and I wanted a food truck in the parking lot, does Happy Cooker have the right to say, no, you can't have a food truck there?
I think there are use cases, and a private event for a marriage at the Hotel de Paris is perhaps different from the property owner behind the Hotel de Paris seeing an economic business opportunity to park a food truck right there. And despite what the Hotel de Paris may be trying to do with its business and maybe a food concept, you've got a food truck there, parked there. Another case would be, again, I've got private property right across the street from the back patio of the brewery. I don't know who owns the lot. I think Excel owns the lot, so I'm not overly concerned, but I don't know if there's other business. I'm thinking in general, other businesses that may have the same issue. I mean, I guess I'm looking at it from the complete other opposite perspective. If there's an entrepreneur there with a lot And all he has to do is give permission, and he can charge money for it. Why wouldn't he do it? And what impact does it have, right? I'm not saying don't allow him to do it. I'm just saying, what's the criteria for beyond getting the permission of the property owner?
Well, there's the approach of, like, say, currently exists for VRBOs, where maybe an affected business gets the notice to kind of pipe up and say, I object. And then it goes to the Board of Selectmen to make a ruling. I mean, currently, if someone wants a VRBO in your neighborhood, every homeowner gets a say, and they can say no. I mean, we could take an approach like that, but then I feel like we're getting ourselves into the weeds as far as
No public streets unless they're closed for an event.
yeah. We know that at the end of the day, we're trying to be business friendly to locals. I mean, or anybody who would like to consider enhancing this, and we want to enhance the visitor experience ultimately, which is currently suffering, and that's the one thing we can all agree on. With the way that restaurants are right now, being closed numbers of days a week that we never anticipated. So it is a catch-22, but I want to figure out the best way to word this for the Board of Selectmen so that we do our jobs here. I mean, so what do we weigh in here? Like, public property with express permission from the Board of Selectmen, and we give people the shot to say no. We say not within a certain number of feet of these types of businesses. What is going to be the most effective way to get this ordinance through without us pigeonholing ourselves?
Remember a few years ago, we changed, or when we discussed food trucks and expanded it, we also took the piece away about having that food truck appear before business promotions because of the timeliness of the meetings. And so, though I agree with the notification of the neighbors and giving them some opportunity to weigh in, because I think Steve is bringing up a very valid point, as Kevin and everyone else, you're trying to expedite the process. And so we need to just keep that in the back of our minds as we put this forward. Do I have a good solution for that right off the top of my head? No. We're still putting a lot of burden of the weight of the burden, whatever, on Kent and Jen Jordan as they go through that checklist. So we need to look at the global piece that you're presenting to the board. And then, the details are going to be kind of ironed out through administrative pieces, not necessarily the way the ordinance is written. Does that make sense? We're not going to specify in the ordinance where it can't go, because that every time a new thing would crop up, we would have to revisit the ordinance and change the ordinance. So as Jen had indicated, with designated by the town type situations, that gives them the broader scope to do that.
So we leave the language open-ended. We say as designated by town of Georgetown or private property with permission from the property owner. We leave that language designated, and that gives us the town, and I'm saying us, when I say us, I mean town of Georgetown, not us as in business promotions, the ability to control the locations. And then if we had some type of a situation where we had, say, somebody who wanted to object deeply to a food truck, the town would ultimately be able to just make that call. Is that fair? Anybody?
I think that's the way it has to be. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
I agree with that. And I agree with that also because with making it so strict, we're talking about different kinds of vendors. And if the jerky store decides tomorrow that they want to get special permitting and licensing, and we all agree to hawk, I don't know, peanuts and jerky on Sixth Street and in music when it's going on, they should be able to do that. And if we designate places like it's all food trucks or stationary businesses, we're going to really undercut that entire vendor situation.
Okay. All right. So that coming into the next piece, then I personally don't feel we should work this into part of the recommendation of the ordinance, but I am open to anyone who feels differently. And that was the ideal locations for the mobile food vendors. And there was listed on the worksheet that Jen gave us. It was the Visitor Center, the Georgetown Lodge, Ophelia's back parking lot, Crazy Horse, the Abrahamson's parking lot, 6th Street in front of the library. Obviously there's more spots than that, but if we don't want to get ourselves into the fray on this and we are going to let the town make these designations, obviously this does not go into our recommendation. The only thing that I thought we could maybe give the Board of Selectmen would be feedback on anywhere we absolutely don't want to see a food truck. Thoughts? I'm pulling up the chat, sorry.
Kevin here.
Go ahead.
Now that season's underway, I'm seeing a lot more charter buses parking, loading and unloading passengers in front of Hotel de Paris, which is designated for that. So even though that block, the 400 block, is less visited by pedestrians and we could use a bigger draw down there, such as food, it would displace the buses. So I would say that we probably avoid the 400 block of 6th Street, even though there's room there. It's being used by charter buses at this time of the year.
Maybe they should invite in the previous block.
Paul, I'm sorry, can you say that one more time?
Maybe the buses should unload in the previous block. That opens up the next block. So, you know, in front of Nicel and Anderson and all those stores, because it's right where they want to be anyway.
Then we would lose all of that parking right in front of the businesses. So
You go in front of the Hotel de Paris.
I'm talking about the parking, but yeah, I think any food trucks on 6th Street, like was spoken about in the last work session, is just not proper.
But we have hawkers.
Oh, that's a different factor, but hawkers aren't going to block the bus or.
I agree with that.
So if we're talking about the mobile food vendors specifically, we designate this, there's again a lot of finite details as far as like who we would and would not allow on 6th Street. I think the one thing that was kind of universally agreed upon was that a large scale food truck like we had last year, and I'll use the example of Lucha's truck, is not necessarily what people are wanting for 6th Street. And I agree with that, mostly just based on the size of the vehicles and the kind of historic look that exists. The one exception that I would maybe say that, and this would again be back towards the ordinance language being vague so the town has the control, is if the street is closed. If it's closed for, say, Christmas market or the Slacker or an event, Bighorn Sheep, if we opted to, whatever, where there's no cars parked, that would be a more appropriate time. But I think on a random Saturday in July, personally, I don't think you want to see a food truck on 6th. And to that end, you probably don't want to see it on 5th either. And you probably don't want to see it on Rose, and you probably don't want to see it on Taos. You probably don't want, I mean, that's where we kind of are in the weeds.
Yeah, I guess to maybe pull it a little bit out of the weeds, being down in the historic district, it's not just 6th Street that a food truck would screw up the whole ambiance of being down in the historic district, right? There's you know, the parking lot across Rose Street from the brewery. You know, you're either sitting on the patio in a business enjoying the view of the Alpine Hose, watching bighorn sheep come down the hill, looking at the mountains, even looking at the back of the historic buildings that run up and down 6th Street is kind of a cool view. So the idiosyncrasy I think Georgetown has that perhaps, it's not the same for other areas of town or other towns is the fact that we're either going to preserve those views or we're not. And I agree with you, Amanda, that, things like Christmas market and things like that certainly can be an exception. The question is, if this, as Kevin always says, if this thing really takes off, what's the throttle to make sure we're just, not myopically looking at 6th Street being the only street that has historic vision, for the town. Go ahead, Paul, I'll call on you.
I agree with what everybody's saying about placements. I just would like to take the historic view and all of that out of the discussion and not have it in any written sense, because modern cars and motor coaches and buses and all the things that no one seems to have an issue with are not historic. The only way to be historic would be to put horses back on the street and remove all of those things. So can we stop with that pretense? We want the views, we want everything else, but it has nothing to do with historic. We have buses in front of the Hotel de Paris blocking that entire view shed. So, that's not what we're looking at, I don't think. I think we do want the ambiance, I want those things. But if we use that wording, we've already made ourselves, we put ourselves open to interpretation, and it's not what we're looking at.
Well, I think like it or not, that's the value of making significant investments downtown. And that's, and that's the draw. And I agree with you, Paul. A modern car parked in the parking lot isn't a horse and buggy from back then. A food truck with a compressor running and a motor running and a light on and being there is different. And yeah, I agree. If I was at the Hotel de Paris, I would hate for buses to be pulling up in front of me, in front of there all the time and blocking. I would be lobbying for drop them off and move on and go park somewhere else out of sight where it's not bothering anybody, and then come back and pick it up. I mean, right now, Central City Black Hawk is looking at a development above Black Hawk, and they're using the land or part of the land that all the buses are sent to when they drop people off from Denver. They drive up a hill, pretty steep hill actually, and they had a big parking lot where the buses sit, and then the buses go back down and they pick them up. I don't know, do they sit in front of the Hotel de Paris while people are walking around? They should.
Yes, they do, and they're not supposed to. So if I could call on Kent and Randy to move the buses along, starting immediately. That sign says loading and unloading only. They park there. Yeah, so if we could get back on top of that, they're supposed to circulate out of 6th Street. And my understanding, what I was told, is they're supposed to park in the town's parking lot next to Town Hall until they come back around and pick up their passengers. Speaking of that parking lot, maybe to me, it's underutilized. It's largely vacant. Every day, there are just a few employee cars there. Why can't all the food trucks be put in the Town Hall parking lot?
I just want to be clear, my point was language, not about placement or anything else. It was just language.
I could respond a little bit to the Town Hall parking lot. More than half of that is actually private property. The other, that's not leased to the town. It's the property owner is just allows people to use it and doesn't complain about it. But if they chose to, they could put up a fence and we wouldn't even be able to get into the cutout to park where we do park town business vehicles. And that would be a weekend activity, because during the week, that parking lot is difficult to find acceptable parking just for staff at times.
Okay. So obviously there's a lot of good discussion here. So we can kind of agree that within the recommendation that and we word it something like, use of the street in the historic district will be allowed on a case by case basis, I mean, is that a fair way to say it? And then that would give us the ability to say, if it was somebody who wanted to have a hot dog cart in Strauss Park, that's a little bit easier than a ginormous mac and cheese truck that wants to park in the middle of the historic district for a month. Are we
I
good
think
with that?
Yeah, I think the wording still has to go back to being designated again by town with, and I'm trying to figure out how to word it so the understanding is all of that integrity will be preserved without eliminating anything that may come up. You know what I mean? And I'm struggling with that a little bit, but that's the general idea is placement will be designated by the town. And somehow if we can convey that we understand we want to preserve all of that integrity and everything that all of the concerns that have been brought up without specifically listing them to get ourselves in trouble.
Yeah, I actually agree. And I think it gets back to Paul's point where we don't want to get into what does historic mean and all of that. And we have to have trust in town administration to be able to make the decisions. So just like I was very much in support of not having the promotions commission approve every single request as they did in the past, and we flipped that over to Kent and his team. I'm comfortable doing the same thing. Through this discussion and through what Jen is referring to as being kind of the general outline, we've got to make decisions. And if the decisions are wrong, if we end up with a food truck for too long in a certain spot, we get the chance to revisit that the next time the request comes in. That's all.
Just really fast, I am going to take my video down. I have to get in the car and ride, but I'm still going to be on with everybody. I just have to bring my laptop along. So my video is going away for a little bit, and but I'm still here. So bye.
All right, and that may be the case for me as well. I have to go get a COVID test so I can come back to our lovely country. So I will probably take my video down as well, but I'm still here also.
So coming back into the designated areas, we can all agree that the basically case by case basis for historic district designated areas only for the hawkers and things along those lines. And again, it says Jen is going to manage the bigger picture as far as the actual placements. But I mean, for Mary and Kent and everybody, does that sound like a reasonable way to present this?
Go ahead, Mary.
No, I'm just getting ready to.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. And to Steve's point, it's good to have these discussions because it gives the general outline of what staff should do. And then it's also easier to adjust as it goes along. If there's specific objections and we're not absolutely specific, then we can make adjustments for as we go.
Another question to language. Jen, you guys would know this. What is that district called? The 6th Street area district?
Historic commercial.
Historic commercial. Okay, that works.
And then there's a ring around it that's historic mixed use. So both of those are commercial district areas. But
I just want to be careful about just calling it historic because the whole place is the National Historic Landmark District.
Right.
Whatever our legal name is.
Okay, I apologize. I was switched to Bluetooth in my car for a minute there. I apologize. So I missed that last comment. If someone could tell me what it was, that would be great. It was Ken when you were talking. I'm so sorry.
We were just going over the name of the historic commercial zoning district and the historic mixed use zoning district. So.
Okay. All right. Okay, moving on. What items would be allowed to be sold from the mobile food vendors? Food, only in food and other merchandise. I personally don't see a problem with other merchandise. I think that we allow vendors into Strauss Park for Christmas market and things along those lines. So and there's other food trucks, or excuse me, not food trucks. There are other trucks that have kind of fun attributes to them. Denver has fashion trucks and craft trucks and all kinds of nifty things that we could certainly allow. What is the commission's thoughts on this?
I'd like to stick with food trucks for this conversation. I think we should be limiting it to food only, or if it's a t-shirt that happens to be associated or a coffee cup that happens to go with that food truck, I'm fine with that. But if they want to bring in their merchandise, then I think you've actually already stated it. Strauss Park and the vending opportunities that we have there is an opportunity for them, and we could utilize Strauss Park better for that situation. I don't want the fashionistas down at the lake. I mean, I don't see this conversation going there at all.
Our deficit right now is food and drink. No one has said our deficit is
fashion,
souvenirs and clothing. So yeah, let's ignore that. Let's do food and drink.
I think that the way that it was worded, and a lot of this I pulled from some other town ordinances, is food and business logoed merchandise would be allowed. Like Mary said, like a t-shirt or a coffee cup with the food truck's logo. But that's how sorry, I'm laughing at Paul's comment.
Yeah, I call that branded.
That's how I see
merchandise.
Yeah, branded logo or logoed merchandise and food only is how I see it.
And that makes perfect sense. If there was, and I don't know if this is a point in the discussion that we should talk about food and drink, as in if someone wanted to have a mobile liquor license and what that would look like. And I don't know if that's even allowed.
There's a whole other set of rules regarding that. So.
Okay. For the sake of this recommendation, is that something that we should even put in there if someone wanted to have a temporary liquor license, that we would allow that, or are we pushing ourselves into the weeds again?
I think that's a whole separate issue, and that's not worth the energy to spend on it. So.
Fair enough. All right.
I think though
So
that
food
when we present this to the board, we better address that is a separate issue, so that again, it doesn't get bogged down. And we're trying to roll out food trucks and greater implementation of that, and that can be discussed way down the line. Okay. But at least address it so that they know it's been.
Fair enough. All right, so food only, straightforward. What hours will the mobile food vendors be allowed to operate? And the questions that were the bullet points on this one were similar hours to the other food establishments, more limited hours of operation, or broader hours of operation. This is, to me, something that's so unique to different vendors. I mean, obviously a truck that sells breakfast burritos isn't going to operate at night, and a truck that sells, mac and cheese maybe isn't going to operate in the morning. So I think is that something we need to manage for this ordinance, or is that to protect the brick and mortar? What is the goal of this bullet point for the commission?
I think it's somewhat to protect the brick and mortars, but also to offer potential options when the brick and mortars are not operational, which would be later into the evening or earlier in the morning, just across the board. But I think also just to preserve integrity of town and how much do we want them operating, and does it even make sense? I mean, I think that was the point of that bullet is, how late do we want food trucks? It's more of a late thing than an early thing, I think. I mean, I don't think anybody cares if a food truck sets up at 6 o'clock in the morning if they're selling coffee and breakfast, but more.
Now, I would beg to differ. I'm not saying they shouldn't, but people who are going to be selling coffee or are selling coffee would probably argue that point.
That is absolutely correct. So I think the short answer is yes, it's to protect both the town itself and the brick and mortars, and but also offering the options when brick and mortars aren't operational. So I don't have the answer, but that's the topic.
Is that something that's possible to leave up to town discretion? Because I can see, the coffee places don't open until 8, and by then I've already been up for 4 hours. So, maybe I want coffee at 4 or 6. But also, who wants that? And then the same thing is, I would love to set up a mac and cheese truck across the street from Mother's at 2 a.m. But then, does the town want that to happen? Is that something that we leave to the discretion of
exactly
the town at first until it becomes an actual issue? And then, because no one really wants anybody to compete with coffee and tea or whoever's there. But I don't want, if we write it in, then we're hamstringing ourselves again. Right?
The one thing I would maybe say to, just as a kind of aside, is that I think that we should have some type of an enforcement for the food truck to commit to certain hours, so that if they don't get the result that they're getting, that they don't just flake out and leave. If they say they're going to be open, if they come up here and they go through this whole conversation with Jen Jordan, and they say they're going to be here from 12 to 4 on a Thursday afternoon, that they stay from 12 to 4 on a Thursday afternoon, or they don't get to come back. They're not allowed. I think that that's important. It can't just be when things are good. They've got to follow through.
Yeah, my hot dog vendor did that at Christmas market.
Oh yeah, no, it happens all the time. I know during John Denver days, we had a vendor that did that 2 years ago when we had John Denver days, that they were, I forget who they were. Actually I know who they are, but I'm not going to say, but they bounced.
Well, it happens all the time in breweries down in Denver, all the time. So again, that's where, I don't want to make it too complicated for Jen, but a scorecard, at some point we know the prime spots, we know the spots that don't work too well. And the guys who do exactly what you said, Amanda, get the primo spots going forward. They earned it.
And just to speak to that scorecard really quickly, there is a ton of resources to vet these trucks available to me. And that's kind of what I've been doing with this process. And I'm not looking at anything with a star rating under 4.8. I read all of the reviews. I look at their reliability scorecards. These are the trucks that I'm going to invite, and obviously keep my own scorecard moving forward to decide whether or not we invite them back. But I agree that they should be designated for a length of time and be held to that length of time as adding to my own personal scorecard. But there are a ton of resources, just so everybody knows, for me to be able to vet and to invite. And that's kind of been my project for the last week is figuring that out. And luckily the web makes it pretty easy to do that.
So to that end, we didn't really come up with a recommendation on this topic. What does the commission want to see in the language of hours of operation for food trucks and what we would allow? So if we say more limited hours of operation or broader hours of operation.
Hey, Amanda.
Amanda, or do we not put a recommendation in for hours of operation at all? Yeah.
Amanda, you were Mrs. Roboto. I didn't really catch most anything you said.
But it was funny.
So I think,
It definitely was funny.
do we want more limited hours of operation or do we expanded hours of operation? We never came to a conclusion on that.
Got it. How's now?
Nope.
Still pretty bad.
Let me ask you,
How's now?
I still think it should be up to town. I have a conflict. I have another meeting in about 5 minutes. Does that, I mean, nobody wants to listen to me drone on anyway. Does that screw up the forum or
better?
anything?
Is this? No, I think we're almost done, but we have we've got 3 more points to get through.
I think the short
We'll
answer
have
is
4
hours of
without you, Paul.
operation. Hours of operation designated by town on a case-by-case basis, or some type of wording like that.
Perfect. Okay.
Yeah,
I'm good with that.
I think Jen's on the right track with being broad, because we're going to discover things that we don't know once we get into this, and then the landscape will always change. There's always going to be a new curveball. So the broader we are, that gives us adaptability and flexibility. So let's stay broad.
Okay. All right. That's perfect. Parking for those visiting the mobile food vendors when outside of town. I don't know if we need to put this into the language of this at all. I think that we can, because we have no control over where guests park in the first place, unless we need to consider language that's going to make it that they don't end up like parking and lining up.
The one thing I would say with that, Amanda, is that the vendor should have a parking plan when they make an application, and then just like we do with special events, and we have discussions with the special event sponsors, discuss parking issues. So as long as they have a parking plan, I think that they are expected to submit that, and that it's just not, well, I don't have any idea where they're going to park,
Okay. No, that makes sense. I didn't consider that point. I will put that into the document. And then any other discussion on parking before we move on? Perfect.
I just think that, and I'm just, I think if you're trying to attract food trucks, I'm not sure how many would be making the trip up and down the hill on a daily basis. So I don't know, at some point, do you consider some place where they can leave their trucks overnight, not on the street, not where they're vending, but somewhere out of sight, but they don't have to really drive it all the way back down the hill.
Right.
So that's coming up but that is something we need to talk about. That is, and this is a great segue into that. So currently, mobile food vendors can remain in Georgetown for 4 days. And I know that was basically what was the word? That for Lucha, there was an exception made. And so knowing that we have that exception, what is the thoughts on where the food trucks can go, or how long they can stay, and then we can get to where do we want them to go when they're not vending?
If they're
How
not,
long do you want them staying?
if they're
Go
not
ahead, sorry.
vending on consecutive days, I would like to see, but just on weekends, and they don't want to go back and forth to their, down the hill location, I would like to see them relocated to the event parking or wherever that Georgetown has down off Argentine towards the lake. I think they need to be kind of out of sight of their operating area, or if they're, and I think the thought has to be there too, as far as enforcement. If all of a sudden they break down and they're not operable for whatever reason, or they don't have their food, get them out of there so that they're not sitting there vacant. They need to be towed out.
Well, and I would go even beyond consecutive days. They're trucks, they got engines. So let's say you got a burrito truck that's open till 11 a.m. daily for a period of time. Do you want to look at that burrito truck from 11 o'clock until the sun goes down every day too?
Good point. Yep.
Mhm. Well, and I mean, we'll get, these are kind of like finite things, but making sure that their area remains clean and organized, and that they're responsible for their trash and all that stuff. And we can get to that stuff at the very end, because that was an issue we did have, was, you know, trash blowing in the street and things like that. Those are not set things. So do they get to stay?
I think we have to allow that to some degree. And I think the wording is simply that they are in the designated location as designated by the town during hours of operation. Outside of that, they must be moved to X location. I don't know. I mean, as simple as we can make it.
I like that. I like that.
Okay. Okay. And then, so we kind of skipped around a little bit. Times of the week, month, or year that mobile food vendors are allowed. Currently, it's only special events. And if we're going to, is this language that we need to have in there specifically? Is there any off times, or what's the commission's thoughts on the best approach here?
If we're trying to encourage food trucks to come here, I don't think we should be limiting our days of week or seasons or whatever. Again, that's going to evolve as this goes on. If someone wants to be here in the cold days of February, God bless them, and let them come, as long as they fit within all the other criteria.
Totally agree.
I'm in agreement. Any
Agreed.
You know, the crepe vendor up in Breck, they're there all year long.
And that pretty much wraps up the checklist. I'm gonna listen to this recording one more time.
Amanda, your volume just went away.
Wait, nope, I lied. There's one more. How many mobile food vendors will we allow?
Is she talking to us? I'm not sure.
She's talking about how many vendors we should allow, like in any given day.
I think that's important.
Yeah, that's the one thing on the second page there. Amanda, your volume went away. So
sorry, I'm back. I
There
can't. Nope, you're good. I apologize. We try to cram a lot into these 2 days off, and unfortunately we had to get in the car and go. We didn't have a choice. So I apologize. You switched to my car's Bluetooth. It was great. So I just said the second page, how many, I realized that after I said that, how many mobile food vendors will we allow at one time? Did I lose it again? No, I'm gone. Can you guys hear me?
Again, we'd be vague because I don't think we know. We haven't designated the areas. We don't know what the capacity is, the occupancy. And so maybe we somehow phrase it, as, capacity of designated areas allows or something.
Okay. Okay. What, any other thoughts on that?
I think the limitation is going to be on the people that want to participate more than us setting a limitation.
Yeah. No,
Let's dream big.
Yeah, and if it becomes unreasonable, then we implement that change if necessary. So
It'll be easy to control that if I'm vetting every truck and inviting those trucks in. Again, we're not just gonna have like random 200 food trucks show up in Georgetown wanting to set up shop. It's gonna be, I think, on a really controlled basis, so we can always control the number.
So we can, and I don't know if you guys heard me say this or not, I am gonna go back and re-listen to this recording to make sure that I get all of these bullet points into this recommendation, and then I'm gonna send it out to you guys to review before it actually goes in front of the Board of Selectmen at the next meeting. So I'll make sure if there was anything that I missed, we'll get it into the document, make sure that that we're all in agreement on how it looks. So I saw that Breckenridge allows 7 trucks to operate in town at one time, but they do not have a limit on special events. So less is more is the kind of consensus that we're hearing. Thumbs ups. Yes.
Again, I think we just don't put a number on it yet until we see what we're dealing with. I mean, Jen is not going to invite in 100 food trucks. Only 99 might show up anyway, but she's not going to do that, so.
Honestly, the way our weekends are, 100 food trucks would be about right. We'd still have a line out the door. And then the things to consider for mobile food vendors that are compiled by Frisco's Planning Commission. And these are kind of these little things that we'll make sure get into the ordinance. They have to have a plan for their waste. They have to have restroom access is hard for Georgetown. I don't think we can put that into there, but making sure that they're clean, that they get rid of their trash, that they have a parking plan, as we discussed, that they are licensed by the health department. And then there's also information here about fire codes. What is and I'm sorry, I can pull it up. The ordinance say, do our food trucks have to be signed off by the fire authority currently?
The fire authority wants to inspect every food truck. I'm sure Randy was getting on for that. Because of the heating element within the food truck. So
sure. No food trucks should blow up on 6th Street. That would be bad.
Yeah.
No salmonella, no fires.
Unless we make a special event of it, yes. Yeah, that would be
correct. So that's already exists. So the fire authority has to inspect a food truck.
So I guess the question is, if you're really trying to encourage food trucks, is that something that happens when the food truck gets up and the fire authority has the ability to go and inspect, or are we saying they have to drive it up ahead of time, which probably is not practical for the food truck? So
it's once they get on site, Steve. So
go ahead, Randy.
I was just going to say that what Kent just responded to. That the fire chief will come out and inspect the food truck when they do get on site.
What if he's not available? Then what's the plan?
He has people.
He has people, and then there's also been, if they've been inspected, usually by Jeffco or by Denver, wherever they're operating on a normal basis. A lot of times they've been inspected by that fire.
Does the inspection happen one time, or does it happen every time they come?
In Denver, it's one time.
Okay.
I don't know what our fire authority would want to see, but I know from previous experience in the metro area, it's much like a CO for a restaurant. They kind of come in and make sure that you're not going to burn anything to the ground. And then you get like sometimes a random routine. Obviously, we still get a random routine fire inspection, but it's not the sign off inspection. So, but maybe Randy knows more than I do. I can see he's unmuted.
I can tell you when there have been food trucks in the county, he's done the initial inspection, and as long as they didn't change their equipment, that continued.
All right, so the planning commission stuff, hours of operation, we kind of went through. Signage, lighting, noise. Do we have, signage, lighting, and noise? Is there anything that we need to get into this document regarding these 3 points?
The only thing I think that needs to be in there, or maybe it doesn't, but it's just something that states that the trucks will be vetted to, I don't know how to word it, they'll look nice. They won't be janky looking mobile food vendors. Everything will be, will fit with what we want in town. I'm at a moment.
I assume you need some language in there as far as
right now. So if you can't hear me,
I assume
Go
you
ahead,
need,
Steve.
yeah, I assume you need some not to set up speakers and, music and stuff like that. I create a outdoor terrace or patio.
Discotheque.
I also think though that the signage and the lighting needs to fall within our general ordinances that pertain to every other business. So we don't want, them advertising with sandwich boards, 500 feet, 1,000 feet, spotlights and all that kind of stuff. I think that has to just be included when Kent and Jen vet these. But I think the appearance too can become very subjective. We all know what we're thinking, what we like, but that could become a little bit difficult to define what janky is in all of our. I get it. I totally get it, but I think it's a concern.
Yeah,
must comply with ordinances with
exactly. So we write the language to say that any mobile food vendor has to comply with our local ordinances that already exist. And then it's simple and it's straightforward. So yeah, like a sandwich board, and that was my first thought. I was thinking on the signage piece. And then was that, a sandwich board was going to be that you already can't do that. So we don't want somebody doing that when our local vendors have to get our local brick and mortars have to have special permission for that. So if it's in our local ordinance, we're not going to make an exception for a mobile food vendor. I think, is there anything else in this?
I'd like to bring up one more thing that I think we should consider. Amanda, we're losing you again.
Why don't you go ahead, Mary?
So just as far as the licensing, the fees that are involved here, since we're expanding this, or we're looking to expand this more than just the 4 days from the special events, and a food truck could be here for, let's say, the whole summer, I think the licensing fee needs to be I think the licensing fee needs to reflect that. So that it's more fair for the brick and mortar businesses. You pay X amount for an annual business license. And so there's a difference if a food truck is going to be here for 1 weekend or 2 weekends, or they're going to be here for every weekend throughout the summer. And I think that needs to be defined, whatever, whether it's a daily fee or whatever.
Yeah, I guess the question I would have is, how does it work with other places and other food trucks? Because it's kind of apples to oranges. Brick and mortar pays a fee for a business license operating year round, or their year round. So I wouldn't want to say, if you pay $125, it should be, 1 divided by 365 times $125. It should be a reasonable fee for a food truck to come in and presumably make good money and then drive away.
I'm glad you guys brought that up, and I apologize. My hotspot went out there, and that was going to be one of the last things we talked about was what types of fees do we want to charge for food trucks?
Yeah, Kevin's got his hand up.
If a nonprofit group decides that they want to get into hawking, and nonprofits at this point don't have to pay for a business license in Georgetown, are they exempt? Like what if Hotel de Paris wants to start selling Otter Pops? Are we exempt from a business license?
Or would that fall within because you're already a licensed business in town, and as another member had brought up, say the jerky store wanted to go out and start selling something at one of the events because they're already a licensed business. I don't know if this ordinance necessarily applies to that. However, if we're doing food, then you're under health regulations and other.
What if it's a
factors.
nonprofit from Summit County or Jeffco that sees an opportunity to sell Otter Pops in Georgetown? Are they exempt from a business license?
I think for the sake of this particular ordinance, we should focus on the licensed food vendor, which would mean that they are not a nonprofit because they'd have a resale license. And then we could work in a language or an exemption for nonprofits if we feel like that's necessary, maybe. But in this particular, for this ordinance, I don't think we're going to have. I mean, of course, there's always exceptions, but using the basis of this for food service licenses only, or whatever that looks like. So a current, what is a current business license fee? I can't remember. Is it $125 for?
It's
brick and mortar?
$256 for a brick and mortar business for the year.
Okay.
A special
So
event business
Steve,
license is $25 per day, if that helps.
Maybe.
Well, in this commission isn't setting those fees. I think it's just a discussion that we're trying to make sure we include.
A lot of the times we set the fees by resolution, so if they need to be changed, it's a lot easier to change it that way than in an ordinance.
I'm out again. Okay. Yeah. Can you guys hear me? No. Shoot.
Yes, we can. Yes, we can.
We can hear you.
Yay. Okay. Okay, cool. Sorry. I was like, I'm in that weird spot on Genesee. So I'm sorry. I heard Jen Yobieski said, but I didn't hear anybody after Jen on this topic.
So she had suggested the fees be dealt with by resolution, not ordinance, and that just makes sense. We've done that in the past, so we can iron that out separate from this piece.
Okay, perfect. So I have the document that with all these recommendations that I will send out. Is there anything else that we didn't get into this that I need to get in here before I send it to you guys that we didn't cover?
I'm good.
Steve?
You're muted.
I'm good. Thank you.
I know Paul had to pop off. I will send the document to him. Kevin?
I'm good for now.
Awesome. Town staff, Randy, Kent, Jen, anybody I'm not seeing have anything else that they want in here before we go?
Amanda, the one question, would you want this for Tuesday's Board of Selectmen meeting or for the following meeting?
I think because I want to let everyone review what I'm going to get together this afternoon. Maybe it should go
to the following one.
Yeah, just in case I miss something, because I want to listen to the recording one more time.
Timing wise would probably be better. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm not. Yeah, I'm going to listen one more time, make sure I didn't miss anything for the notes. Once the recording is available, which would be, Jen, could you send me the recording after the meeting as soon as it's in the cloud or whatever?
Yeah, and you can just go to the website directly
it'll be on
there.
already?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yes.
All right. I wasn't sure how fast we would get it up because I'm going to listen to it pretty soon.
I think with that schedule, that also allows us to discuss this again at BPC before the following board meeting in August.
Yeah.
That gives us a little bit extra breathing space.
That's
and
true.
time to kind of fine tune this.
Okay. no, that is better timing for sure. And then that'll also give the commission people that were not on today the ability to weigh in if they so choose. But at this point, I think that we have a pretty good direction. And I apologize again that I had to get in the car, guys. I didn't mean to have to do that in the middle of this meeting, but on our days off, having to go get supplies for the weekend just happens. And if we don't go, then we're not going to have food. So
Can we invite Gerald Dahl to the BPC meeting for this part of the discussion?
oh yeah, is that we could do that? Is that something Kent and Mary?
Yeah,
Is that
we'll ask. We'll talk
Okay.
with him.
Great. He might have some great language for us.
Probably not at 8 o'clock in the morning, but yeah, it'll be all right.
yeah, it is an early meeting. All right. Any other discussion points on the subject of food trucks before we depart?
Way to
So
plow through it, Amanda. Good job.
Thanks. Sorry again. I had to get in the car. I feel really bad. It was not my intention. So because we don't have anything formal to vote on, I think the only thing we need at this point is a motion to adjourn. And Jen's on a scooter in East Lamoille. That's amazing.
I'll make that motion.
Awesome. Can I get a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Meeting is adjourned. It is 9:21 a.m. Thank you, everybody. I will get this document out today.
Bye, guys. Jen, don't crash.
No crashing. Bye-bye.